Joining me now is the president of the Convention of States. Honored to have Mark Meckler on this morning. Mark, thanks for joining me here on the Todd Starnes Show today. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thanks for filling in, and great to be with you.
We appreciate you, and Joe Biden has been speaking on a couple of things. He's mentioned gun control, mentioned a little bit on a couple of other topics, but we kind of have an idea of what he's probably going to discuss. But last segment, Mark, and I'd love to get your take on this, and I know the conventionofstates.com has touched on this as well. I'm very concerned about this effort by Reverend Al Sharpton to go after Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to try to get them to capitulate to scrap the filibuster.
Yeah, I'm worried about that, too. I will be stunned if they don't scrap the filibuster. In fact, I've been saying they're going to scrap the filibuster since Republicans had control long ago for the first time in a long time. The filibuster was going to die, and it was going to die an unceremonious death. And the only question was, were the Republicans or the Democrats going to kill it? We have a history here, right? We know that the Democrats first killed the judicial filibuster, and that's how we had the Republicans follow suit, and we got all those Supreme Court justices. So we knew this was coming. Democrats always do this sort of thing when they have power, and so I think it's coming. From my perspective, there's really not much of a question around that. The question is just when.
Yeah, because it seems like as we alternate parties, it seems like we inch a little bit closer, a little bit closer. I know many conservatives, many Republicans were hoping for at least a split in the Georgia runoffs to provide a 51-49 firewall. That did not happen. Kamala Harris, of course, getting the tie-breaking vote. And is it fair to say, other than Joe Manchin and Sinema, the filibuster is basically the only hope the Republicans have left for not going down an extremely steep, slippery slope?
Yeah, they actually have one other procedural maneuver, which is kind of interesting. I've been researching it over the last couple of days. The Senate has a rule. It requires a quorum. Okay. And a quorum meaning there have to be 51 senators in place before they can actually vote on anything, including removing the filibuster. So the Republicans could just simply choose to not show up in Congress and just not show up in the Senate chambers. Now, they actually have to leave the building because the sergeant at arms actually has authority to go get them and physically escort them to the chambers. So I think it is possible, and I wouldn't put it past McConnell and the Republicans right now. He said they'll take all measures necessary. They could leave the building, they could head home out of district, and be very hard to drag them back in and get a quorum.
And one of the consequences of the filibuster, if it went aside, would it be fair to say that H.R. 1 would be almost a slam dunk at that point?
Yeah, if they remove the filibuster and they have a quorum, I believe H.R. 1 is going to get passed and signed. It is a slam dunk, and I hate even calling it H.R. 1. It sounds so innocuous. It's not a big problem. It's just some numbered, lettered bill. The reality is I call it the DDA. It's the Death of Democracy Act. That's the intent, is to permanently destroy our voting system in the United States of America. There's another major consequence, Tim, that most people don't talk about. In H.R. 1, in the Death of Democracy Act, is a provision which requires organizations like mine, like Convention of States, to make all of its donors public. And we know in the day of the woke mob, what they're going to do is they're going to go after all conservative donors and try and dissuade them from supporting organizations like ours. And people shouldn't think, oh, this is just big national organizations. This is your church, by the way. It would require your church to reveal all its donors. And so this is the intent, is to shame conservatives from the public square.
And on the flip side, Mark, is it true that any donor up to $200, the government then has the authority to match that political donation times 6?
Yeah, that is true. And so the point is what they're going to start doing is they're going to start public funding of elections. So this is it's really an outrageous assault on our whole electoral system. And the intent of Democrats is to permanently enshrine their victories in 2020 and make that absolutely for all time. That's the goal of the Death of Democracy Act.
Mark Meckler, the president of the Convention of States.com, joining us this morning and this afternoon. Mark, guns is a massive topic now in the wake of, and there's shootings, there's frequent shootings, but the Democrats have been trying to make hay out of what happened in Atlanta, jumping the gun, calling that racial violence, and then in Boulder, Colorado, where 10 have been killed at that supermarket. Guns are on the forefront once again.
Yeah, and I want to be careful when we talk about these shootings to keep it in context, because we say there are frequent shootings, and the only reason we think that is because of the media. Yeah. The media plays it up because of the leftist narratives on gun control. The reality is, since 2012, there have been 7 what are referred to as mass shootings on average per year, 7 per year since 2012, in a country of 330 million people.
Yeah.
The odds of being anywhere near, even being in the same state as a mass shooting, are just absolutely tiny. You're absolutely at more risk by driving your car to the grocery store than you are from a mass shooter in a grocery store. So there are not a lot of mass shootings in the United States of America. On the world stage, we're about number 7 per capita in mass shootings on an annual basis. So this is just a false narrative, and all it is an excuse to override the Second Amendment. That's what the left has fantasized about doing for a long time, and that's what they're going to try to do here.
In your opinion, can they neuter it without scrapping it completely?
Well, I don't think they can legally, but that doesn't seem to stop the Democrats. And where I think they will act and where the president can act unilaterally, really do a lot of damage to the Second Amendment, is through the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Because in the regulatory arena, the president has a lot of discretion, and these agencies have a lot of discretion how they interpret their own regulation. And they can interpret them in ways that, frankly, are entirely ridiculous. And so I expect to see the ATF cracking down on all sorts of firearms. And one area that I'm personally really interested in is people who manufacture guns at home. And a lot of people are hobbyists. They build guns, and I'm one of those people. And I think they're going to take a lot of those parts off the market, a lot of the machines that do the work on those parts off the market, and prevent people who are hobbyists like myself from building weapons.
And Mark, let me ask you one more question about guns and what they could do regarding the Second Amendment. You mentioned the ATF. Is it possible that the Biden administration could do what they've done on what a lot of state and local municipalities have done and declare guns a public health emergency?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a different approach, but I do think that I don't think anything's out of question with this president. I'm going to be frank. I'm not watching the press conference right now, but I don't think Biden is lucid any longer.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that he's in control of the presidency. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I think it's really sad. But I do believe others are in control of the presidency at this point. I believe they have a radical agenda. They believe they have the wind at their backs. They control both houses of the legislature. Obviously, they control 1600 Pennsylvania. I think they have a lot of faith in the courts, and I think in a lot of cases that's well-reasoned. The Ninth Circuit, by the way, just held that you have no right to carry a gun in public, which is pretty outrageous, inconsistent, in my opinion, with the Heller decision. So I think they're going to go big. I think they're going to go for broke, and they're going to take everything that they can possibly get. So I think they're going to do a lot of stuff by executive action that folks who value the Second Amendment are going to be horrified by.
Hey, Mark, it seems like at every type of public event we see Vice President Kamala Harris. Very rarely would you see President Trump and Mike Pence together, but Kamala Harris always seems to be there. Is she, in your opinion, is she kind of a safety net, or is she a puppet master? Do you think that she has any kind of control over him, or is she just there in waiting to help him out in the meantime?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's actually a little bit deeper than that. I think there's a third layer. My opinion is that President Obama is actually in charge of this administration. There's actually an interview a year or so back where he talks about he would have loved to have a third term, provided that he could just be behind the scenes and somebody else would mouth his words. And if you look at the makeup of the administration, it's mostly old Obama administration folks. So I think Kamala Harris is playing a secondary role, and she is the president in waiting. But I really think this is being run by Obama-era staffers. That's who's in control of the White House right now.
Mark Meckler, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. ConventionOfStates.com. Mark Meckler, the president of the Convention of States. Mark, we hit several topics in a short period of time. I want to thank you for your insight. Thank you for giving us a few moments of your time here at the Todd Starnes Show.
Thanks, Tim. God bless.
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for ConventionOfStates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to ConventionOfStates.com and volunteer today.